Good evening. Good evening, or as they say in Kalapuya country, Kamchi Lakwan, which I've been given to understand means, what's up in Kalapuya. Since we're on Kalapuya land, it behooves us to remember that given our topic tonight. If you're new to DiversiTV, welcome. I'm Mark Harris, your host, and DiversiTV is a weekly show that we do here at Lane. And if you're part of our growing legion of fans out there, welcome back. We roughly correspond to the terms. It's basically finals week. So the last thing that we do is look at just before the Abrahamic religions holidays. And what I mean by Abrahamic holidays, I mean the religions that all revere the patriarch Abraham, that is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, or Eid, that's what I mean by Abrahamic. But we give, tonight we're looking at spirituality and religion from a native perspective. And so without any further ado, let me introduce you the concept of what we're trying to do here with DiversiTV. Our mission is to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get it. And because any given particular people has diverse views, the views of our guests are to be taken as examples of possible human viewpoints rather than indicative of any one group. So we don't necessarily have spokespeople for a particular people. So our schedule roughly corresponding with Lane terms, so we've been doing this for nearly 3 years. We always start with a native perspective because we're on Turtle Island, and out of respect, as a Maroon, that is the indigenous term for a African native cultural and genetic hybrid, we give respect to the land that we're on, as well as as many of our ancestors as we're in touch with. So we start with a native perspective, then because we're speaking English, an Anglo perspective, then Africans in America, Latino. This season we did a native prison art show. November 12th, we did a gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, questioning, intersexed, transgendered, transsexual, two-spirit perspective. November 19th, we did a show with Margaret Johnson Bales, who was a member of the local black community who went to the Olympics in 1968. We actually had her here during the Olympic trials and just aired that show a couple of weeks ago. We looked at an indigenous Thanksgiving, from Thanksgiving that is from an indigenous point of view with Michael Samino, ethnic studies professor here. Last week we did class with Mustafa Moore, who's a student here. And tonight we're looking at spirituality and religion. And then we'll begin again the second or third week of January with our first show. So, just as a rhetorical question, what if Native Americans dug up for example, Native American anthropologists, and there are some, but they wouldn't do this, but just think about it as a thought experiment. What if Native Americans dug up your ancestral graveyard to study how you lived, or kept your family's bones to study them for scientific purposes? How would you feel about that? What if Native Americans climbed the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. for sport during one of your sacred times? And if you can see this particular picture, it basically is two climbers climbing the Devil's Tower. Now, I'm not sure what the timing is, but it is an issue in Indian country because there is a time that's sacred to the local indigenous people in Wyoming. I believe it's the Lakota, a branch of the Lakota, and they've asked people and asked the Park Service to keep people off what's referred to in English as the Devil's Tower during that particular time. And white folks ain't having it. No, I don't care if it's your sacred time. We want to we came here to climb this mountain, and we're going to climb it because it's there. And we don't care that it's your sacred time, essentially, because we're Americans and blah, 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 blah. So what if Native Americans climb the National Cathedral for sport? So on the left is the National Cathedral. So during one of your sacred times, how would you feel about that? So the Bear's Lair or the Devil's Tower. What if Native American sacred sites? So on the right you have Carolina, the Wintu Nation, basically doing a prayer at their sacred spring on Mount Shasta. And basically one of the issues, it's been a fairly hot issue because a lot of folks, a lot of, shall we say, New Agers, go to that site year-round to wash their crystals or take from the waters during the Winnemem people's sacred times, when they've basically asked people to either stay away. Plus, there's an issue of the dam at Shasta Dam, basically covering up some of the sacred sites there, and asking people to take down the dam. So, what if, just to pose the final question, Native American sacred sites or spiritual practices were considered no less sacred than those of the Christian churches, a Jewish synagogue, or a Muslim mosque? So our guest tonight is Don Moccasin, and he'll let you know what his cultural and national affiliation is. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Mark, for inviting me. I understand there are a significant number of Native American beliefs and issues that have been circulating in the media. And first off, I'd like to introduce myself. The way we introduce ourselves in the Native circle, we start off with, my name is Wamni Ho. I come from the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. So my tribe is was named by the French people, and it was referred to as a Assiniboine. But we people call ourselves Nakona, which my father was originally from Canada, and he traveled with a group of Native people. And at that time, he came down to a place called what is known as Montana, and met my mother, and she was in that area, and as a result of that, here I am today, and so I am 100% Nakona. My mother and father are both of this tribe, and we believe we are all good people, and each person has their own orientation, and I speak from a Plains view. We have several different views of Native Americans, and so I speak from that belief and concept of life. So, so that's my perspective of life and where I come from.
Nakona.
Yeah.
What does that word mean in your language?
In my language, it means the people. And I found out that a lot of tribal people, when they name themselves or have been given a name, it's affiliated with being the people. So I would say it falls along the line of universal way of considering ourselves in relationships to the universe, and we're all people on this sacred Mother Earth, wherever we're at. So one of the beliefs that I have about my people, my brother tells me that the story goes that we were once a Great Lakes people. And so I've been following this history, and so there's a number of different stories that go with that. And one of the stories is that we were originally back in Minnesota in the Great Lakes area, and we were pushed back west by the Menominees and the Chippewas and Ojibways, and it makes a lot of sense to me because some of our elders in my tribe still have the designs. And as you know, a lot of Native people wear their regalia, and it will signify something about who they are and also where they come from. So the dress I'm wearing tonight is more of a plains orientation, Lakota. And so Na Kota, Lakota, Dakota are very similar. But we are not Lakota. We are different, very distinct language and customs and beliefs.
Talk about some of those beliefs.
The beliefs that I have learned as a very young man come from the Plains View. And so one of the beliefs that we have is that we have certain ceremonies that we practice, and each one of them may be related to the ages, the 4 ages that we go through. From very early childhood, there's a ceremony performed with the young child from early birth, and they will collect the umbilical cord and use that and fashion that into a medicine bag. So that young child will always have that and retain that. So when they grow up, and they'll have that around. And we say a lot of our young children nowadays are so busy doing things, searching for something. And the elders will say, "Oh, you didn't get a ceremony when you were a baby, so now you're always looking through drawers, always looking for something." So you're looking for that umbilical cord that they didn't give you.
Right.
And so that's what the elders will tell us. They'll say, "Oh, you're too busy, so you need to settle down." So they'll explain to us that, well, at the beginning of life, you know, this is one of the ways that you learn about who you are. And it'll be shared with your elders, and they'll explain that this is you, this is where you come from, these are your parents, these are your ancestors, this is your tribe, and this is where you belong. So it's a sense of belongingness.
Yes.
And so that's that comfortable feeling that a lot of our children get when they're around their community. So they say it takes many people in the tribe to raise our children, and it really does. So that's the piece that is missing now, because we've been so scattered to the winds, you know, by certain, you know, institutions in this land. So a lot of people are coming back to that way.
The black robes, for example, as you mentioned before we came on, as being one of the scattering forces.
Exactly.
Yes, the black robes of, well, I guess there's no nice way to put this, weaponized Christianity, where basically, since, as we were talking about before, many people may or may not know that, but according to federal law, it was illegal for you even to be taught by your elders or even that worldview before 1978. And as well as, since I'm an alcohol and drug counselor, and that is actually how we first met up in that alcohol and drug context, before 1952, it was also illegal for natives to drink alcohol, but as a policy of war, the War Department allowed the importation of alcohol onto native reservations, plus imprisoned anybody that refused or forbade Indian people to drink alcohol from the native side, because a lot of tribes would not fall for the trick of trading land for alcohol. And so those people were targeted specifically in violation of federal law, but that was still a practice. What about the next stage of life after, say, childhood? What about adolescence?
Adolescence occurs, we typically will go through another ceremony with our young people, and so before they reach adulthood, you know, they're becoming into the tribe and learning certain responsibilities. And so they've been given these responsibilities to follow. And a lot of times if you belong to a family of, say, dancers, people that dance for other people, they will be taught certain styles of dancing. Or if you come from a group of people in your family, you learn how to bead. So you make regalia. So that's been taught to the young people, and this is what you'll learn how to do and continue, and you'll never go hungry from that. So those are the teachings that we need to continue doing with our young people. So that, and we all know in education, the best things that we learn early in life will continue with us as we grow older. And a lot of times when we get old, we forget, but if you already have that orientation when you're very young, you'll pick it up very easily. And I tell a lot of my friends, that have starting learn how to dance, and if you've been dancing before, it's like riding a bike, you will pick it up very quickly. So these are some of the things that we learn early in childhood and also in our adolescent years, and which will continue. And so sometimes we fall down, we don't, listen, and that's how we learn the valuable lessons of life. And I think it's very true with Native people. A lot of times the elders will not chastise our young people, but they will get the subtle communication from their community members. And maybe you didn't do that right, or maybe you didn't understand what they were saying, and so they figure it out on their own. So that's the best way to do things too. So for our young people to learn the lessons of life, sometimes you're going to have to learn it from other people.
And the next stage after that?
When we reach adulthood, certainly we have been given certain responsibilities with our children, and we go through marriage ceremonies and learning about, number one, how to conduct ourselves publicly, and our relationships with our family members and our children. And we go through a marriage ceremony with not only ourselves, but also learning about other people. And from time to time, we will meet people that are like us, but also you have to remember that in a tribal system, you will meet other people, and you have to learn how to respect their customs too. Certainly, it's better to listen, watch, and then speak to communicate with another group of people, and it takes a long time. A lot of our Native people are gifted in that way, so we'll observe and learning how to do things by practicing and doing it ourselves and actually doing it with other people. That's why they say we're not very competitive or team-oriented. And a lot of our people, that's how, we've been taught, individual. We compete individually on our personal best, and we say a lot of our Native kids are good runners, good in track, but as far as working in teams and competitive games, it's very difficult for them to excel in that arena. So that's just my personal experience. I've seen that. That's where I work.
It's mostly about your performance and sort of like your personal best within yourself, being the best you can within yourself.
Yeah. So that's much better than, so if you're achieving your personal best in life, and comparing yourself to another person, it's very difficult, because you look at somebody else and they may have more or less, But if you're doing personal best and you feel good about yourself, you're feeling okay about life, and you continue to strive and achieve to your personal best and what you feel for your tribe. Here again, I believe that we need to consider our communities, the health and welfare of our communities. And if we do that and achieve what we strive for, our communities will get stronger and better and, healthier in that.
So speak to me of the elders then. You talked about adulthood, and so elders are adults, but there's another stage, I think, beyond adulthood in terms of being an elder.
Elders,
how do you know when someone's an elder? How does one become an elder?
well, we've been told, at the age of 50, 55, you're an elder, but the reality is, that we have older people that I don't consider myself an elder. I'm 57 and I'm still learning many things of life, and I have to get advice from the people that are older than me. So, being an elder, it has nothing to do with age. And yet I've seen young kids that have been through many experiences in their lives, and they can teach me many good things too. And so they're not an elder, but they have the learning and the background and experience to show me and tell me certain things about life that I don't understand, or, so I can learn from them too. So being an elder is an important element in our communities. So our elders, in some way, have been, there's this big gap that has occurred as a result of the government. We have been broken, and we're slowly recovering from that process of assimilation. And so our elders, in some ways, they have certain gaps in their experience, and we know that. So, and reality is, I've been told many times that I talk to my friends and they say, well, I've been told this, but what do you think? So we kind of communicate and say, well, this is what I've been taught, So we compare and say, well, this is what I've been taught, and whatever works, in this situation, it's best for everybody. But the important thing is that we're communicating and sharing ideas and working it together. And that's what we call consensus model. And the consensus model in this society doesn't work very well because it takes a lot of effort, because everybody has to sit down at the same table and communicate, and we have to talk and talk and talk and communicate everybody's view and agree on one certain subject or task. So
and that definitely takes time, a lot of time that people might not necessarily take if they haven't taken the time beforehand to build those relationships and understand what people mean, and get through the conflicts if there are any, and
So that was the key to our survival. I believe that our ancestors, my ancestors, used the consensus model in deciding, making a choice in whether to move camp, stay camping in a certain area, using the historical background of the area for game, the weather conditions, and so there was a lot of dialogue occurring, but also trusting, the path, the understanding of our elders, so they knew that, well, this is what happened 4 seasons ago. Or maybe there was a fire in the area, and so people would communicate that, and they would come to a consensus before we made any major decision. So typically the small decisions may have been, with the family group or clan. So that was the way we did things. And so we're trying to base our decisions now in our communities in that old way of doing things, and I think it's working very well.
What else do you find that works well in terms of your traditions?
I believe that what works well in my tradition is that we continue to include our children in the decision making, including the elders and the people that are working in the professions. And so when we send our kids off to school and they come back, And so they're providing us with some expertise in the profession so we can further our communities. You know, for the longest time, we thought education was bad because it took away from our customs and beliefs. But the reality is, you know, when we go to school, we learn the concepts, but we also retain that true belief inside, the belief about learning to dance, to sing, and to continue doing those things in spite of the educational system that we have to go through. And I've learned a lot. You know, I've been studying the education system for as long as I've lived, and I've learned that some things you have to get on your own, and you have to go out and search and do it for yourself and make that make sense out of it. And for me, education was difficult because I had to learn how to read, how to apply different concepts, and these were rather foreign to me when I first came to college, as an example. So I had to read books over and over and over, whereas somebody that's raised in this educational system goes in there and just believes everything the teacher says and continues
yes,
to
whether or not it's true.
So for me, I had to do a lot of questioning, and so for me, it was just a matter of survival and saying, yes, okay, this is the way you believe it is, and I'll leave it at that. But inside, I knew it was different.
One of the challenges I find that we often face is that piece that you were talking about within the educational system. Because remember, I guess our topic tonight is spirituality and religion, and looking at the difference between spirituality and religion, and that if your stories, like you referenced, okay, well, we've been camping here for a while, or maybe we don't camp in this place because there was a fire. It's basically your relationship to a land, to a particular place with a history, and that is reflected in everything that you do in terms of, go to slide if you will. So these slides are from a training that I collaborated on with other Native folks called the GONA, Gathering of Native Americans. So it was, the federal government giving money to teams of people of color to come up with culturally specific community organizing for substance abuse prevention training. So I participated in two of them, the African American one and the Native American one, because of my dual heritage. And so one of the things we looked at that you identified, and that's why I kind of questioned you on that, because it dovetailed with the 4 stages of life. As a child, and this particular slide talks about that, where you see the child holding a sacred hoop, being held by mom, surrounded by grandma, grandpa, younger siblings, and teenagers. So that sense of belonging, this is who you are, this is who your people are, this is where you belong. Then the adolescent stage, the stage that I gave the general label of mastery, where, okay, if your people or your family were dancers, learning, the dances, the songs that go with the dances, the history behind the dances, and basically getting the skills of life that you would then contribute to the community. And then adulthood, so, this stage, with marriage, for example, and contributing your skills to the community, interdependence. And then the 4th stage in terms of elderhood, where is characterized by the phrase generosity, where here you have an elder basically showing particular either dance move or an outlook, basically constructing regalia, et cetera, which could happen at any level, but basically then passes on. So the culture itself and the spirituality and the worldview itself is passed on. Now, with the educational system, since the educational system we both grew up in was essentially designed to have us think in a particular way and have our mutual history or our shared history erased, so that we're taught to believe, oh, Columbus discovered America, even though and that whole narrative, India, Thanksgiving, all that kind of stuff, and that we had no connection before that. Like, history begins in 1492, and nothing happened on Turtle Island. Well, actually, even the phrase Turtle Island doesn't even exist within that cosmology. And so, many of us had to read books over and over, and, still, if we had a song to learn or a particular dance to learn or, a view of spirituality to learn, that was erased. And so even looking at the Abrahamic religions, where they evolved not on Turtle Island, a completely different worldview, completely different history than the people that introduced them to you and I. It's like Jesus wasn't blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and his name wasn't Jesus. But we're not taught that. We're taught basically, that whole line about, that person within the government said long ago, the purpose of Indian education is to kill the Indian and preserve the man so that it becomes a American citizen, right? And so erasing all that view of spirituality so that we have, Indian Mormons and Indian this and that, but anything but, our own native spirituality, whatever that is. And so that has been represented to be a lot of different things. So when you look at the, how do you preserve and what does it mean to be a native person or an Indian person in the so-called 21st century?
We have been studied for many years, and I've done some reading on that, and it was in the middle of the 1900s. They said that our native people were disappearing and they were going to be gone.
Right.
And what they were suddenly surprised to find out that the native people were alive and resilient. And a lot of the elders kept their traditions and customs in spite of many attempts to remove the beliefs, the concepts, and religion. And so we are resilient. And it's been said many times that our people continue to live in spite of the poverty, the famine, the desecration, the decimation of our people. So we've learned how to survive in many ways, and so that's the important thing, that with our tribal people, that we continue to live daily and remember the Creator put us here for a purpose, and that's the ultimate choice that we've been given, is to continue to doing what we do, and because it works. And to teaching our children and listening to our elders, that's the important thing. One of the things, Mark, that I discovered early in life about organized religion. Organized religion is based on followers, and I had my own personal experience as going through the 4 ages of life. And so when I was 4, I was adopted into a white family. And they belonged to the Mormon religion. And as a result, their whole concept was we were the lost tribe of Lamanites.
Right.
So we were...
within that worldview in the Book of Mormon, yes.
We were found, and they were intent to convert me to this religion. But I found that sitting in seminary school, one of the concepts early on in the Mormon religion is that you have to read the Bible. Certainly,
Which version of the Bible? Not the Book of Mormon.
Well, that's included.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we did.
So there is a distinction, but they do include it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So the organized religion gave me a perspective about what the Western Europeans were thinking. So I, as a young Native American man, considered their beliefs and pondered, well, what did this mean to our Native people? So I sat in the back of the room for a few years of my life, up until the age of 16, and at one point in a prayer service, the what they call bishop asked each one of us young people to come forward, and when you have found the Holy Spirit has come into your life, please come forward and express that. And I said at the very end, I considered that, and I mouthed the words for many years, but at one point, when I was sitting there, I said, this is not my belief. I discovered for myself that I did not belong within organized religion, because it continued to put a mask or shadow and covered your eyes to the true belief surroundings of everything around me. And I went up there and I said some few words and sat down. But in my mind, in my heart, I did not believe that this religion was going to be for me. So at that point, I made my choice to find who I was, and that's when I pursued going into my own Native American traditions, and that took the form of joining in, going to the sweat lodge ceremonies, going into the Sundance, doing vision questing. And so I immersed my life totally into Native American ceremonies, and that lasted for about 20 years. And so I went both ways. So when you say both worlds, you know, I know what organized religion is about, and I also know what Native American ceremonies and traditions are. And so I found that the Native American traditions may have some weaknesses, but the strength that's built in that, the spirituality, continues. You know, it's very strong, and it's the pervading force that's upon this world that we live in. And so I've found that through ceremonies. You know, we offer tobacco, we pray, we use sacred pipe, we use the Sundance to offer ourselves to the tree. So these are things that do work. And so a lot of our people say, well, you know, when you pray to the tree, is that something that, you know, makes, you know, it's going to happen the next day? I said, no, it's not. You got to believe in that way. You got to follow that way. You have to sincerely believe that something good's going to happen, and you have to take the steps to make that happen. So in some way, it's hard, harsh, and you have to, you know, give up yourself, and it's through humility and through pain and suffering that you get something out of that. So that's the reason I went to those many ceremonies. You know, this is what I believed that was going to happen to me. And as a result, you know, I've been blessed with a good family and good people around me. And this is all we're given. You know, this is all we have to leave this earth with. You know, this is it.
Let me attempt to. I feel I get what you're saying. And I feel because it's television, we have to kind of illuminate what you were saying. And correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to do that. So when you say pain and suffering, right? It's not so much that the object is pain and suffering, but there's a certain amount of discomfort that that you're expected to give of yourself, and that might be uncomfortable and might involve some pain and suffering. So, you know, if you're sitting in 4 rounds of a sweat, you know, and the rock people, you know, are making it hot, and it's dark, and, you know, and you're praying and prayers are being given, that's uncomfortable. To sit in there and that round, and it feels like, oh, when is this going to be over? When is it going to be over? And you get pierced to the Sundance or whatever, and give yourself, as you say, to the tree. You don't do that every day, but there's still a connection to the tree. And if we talk about what happens in a TP meeting, with medicine, right? There's going to be a certain amount of discomfort when you eat the medicine, and throwing up is part of that, and it's uncomfortable. But then you have the sense of connection afterwards, especially through the prayer, because those meetings are, not in the way that people have thought about them. It's not about getting high. It's prayer, and it's a sense of connection that you don't necessarily get, as you say, with the organized religions, reading from a book. There's not necessarily a text. There are songs, but it's not a hymnal, because it's not necessarily written down. Because that was one of the things that kind of was imposed upon us by the black robes, is that whole idea of the five civilized tribes. Well, they're civilized because they live in square houses and they keep slaves and they worship the Christian religion, and they have alphabets and they do farming or whatever. And so I guess sometimes the difference between spirituality and religion is that a religion has dogma, and it has a text, and it has this, that, and the other. And so oftentimes Native American spirituality or religion, if we use those terms interchangeably, don't necessarily have the same standing, because the same things are not, it's not part, there's no hymnal, there's no Bible, there's no Quran or whatever. There is, there is a relationship to the land or a relationship to certain traditions, and that's what we're celebrating, as it were.
I have been told by one of my teachers, a marathon runner, and he told me, he said, when you dance, he looked at me, I was at a powwow, and he said, do you get that good feeling when you dance really hard? I said, yeah. Physically? Yeah. What about spiritually? He said, thought about that? And I said, yeah, that's it too. So it's this overall good feeling that occurs as a result of dancing to a throbbing drum, feeling that music and dancing, and recreating an ancient song and dancing hard, pounding your feet and dancing to the rhythmic movement of the song makes you feel good physically, spiritually, emotionally, and all through your body. And he said, well, yeah, that's very similar to what a marathon runner will feel. They feel the pain, but they push through the pain, and as a result of that, they get the good feelings that go with it. I said, yeah, that's the physical part, but you feel that, but there's more to it.
Yeah. And you certainly get that, the few times that I've drummed, you get into the rhythm, and at first it's an effort, and then all of a sudden the drum is beating you, and there's no effort at all. And even though it's not as strenuous as dancing, you still get a good feeling from it. And it's not, as a musician, it's not just musical. There's a connection there. It's a heartbeat there. That isn't just the people that you're drumming with. It's also the energy of the dancers not playing off you, but basically it's all part of the same thing.
So when I dance at a powwow, I don't dance for anybody. I don't really actively look in the audience. I don't look at anybody else, and I take my glasses off, when I'm dancing typically, and because I found when I wear my glasses, I get distracted, and I look around, and I see people, and they say, hey, and I get distracted. But the reason I dance is I dance for the people. I dance for elders. I dance for people that can't walk. I dance for the children. And so these are the reasons I dance, And physically, you get the payoffs there too. Typically, in the summertime, I go to many powwows, and that's what I live for. So, dancing is my vocation. It's my heart. It's what I love to do, and my friends say, "Do you take powwows? You know, like dancing is part of your way of life?" And I say, "Yeah, this is what I do." And you take that away, it's kind of like cutting out part of your spiritual being, and so that's what religion did to me. They took that out of me.
Right.
So when I started dancing, I said, "Oh, I'm getting this good feeling back," and it's a native way of thinking, believing, and doing. You know, so that's what we do.
So I think it's important to underline then that often what happens at powwows is not a performance, it's prayer. It's
Exactly.
an act of spirituality, because I've seen people on occasion, you know, after a song's over, they like clap, like, yo, wait a minute, that was not a performance, yo, that was prayer. Do you clap after you know, I mean, you may clap during an African American gospel song, but during the song, when the song's over, you don't clap. It's not performance, it's prayer. So it's critical to underline that. So that's some of the expressions of Native spirituality. So what, in your view, is central for others to understand about Native spirituality?
I think the piece that people need to understand, take away from Native spirituality, is that our people did this for many, many thousands of years. And so when they do it, it's because they've been taught in their own tribal traditions and their customs, and they feel good about doing that. And it's not always for a purpose. Maybe it's just for enjoyment, pleasure. But it's also believing, when we dance upon our Mother Earth, this is our sacred being. She's alive. So for people that are seeing that for the first time, I would think that consider that an act of religion, spirituality, a way of honoring the sacredness of the universe, the sacredness of living on the sacred Mother Earth, because we believe that the heartbeat that we hear at a powwow is the heartbeat of our mother, and this is the earth that we live on. So we're honoring her and everything.
So that's pretty powerful. When you were talking about earlier the weaknesses of Native spirituality, what did you mean by that?
I would say a lot of our people have taken the dance to an extreme, and what they call contemporary. See, our elders, I believe they thought and believed that Native dance should be done in a sacred context. So when you take the Native dance beyond that context, it goes into a commercial, contemporary arena.
Yeah.
So that's the weakness I see.
Now, you don't mean necessarily like sometimes you'll see at some powwows like competitive, people wearing numbers, and you don't mean that competitive sense, or unless that's what you do mean.
I've seen that occur within my lifetime.
Yeah.
And when I first seen it, I realized that our culture had changed because a lot of our people don't have a strong customs and beliefs and orientation. And for some of our people that have lost that, this is what they believe the powwow will bring back for them.
Yeah.
So, and it may not be right, it may not be wrong. It's just kind of, we believe that culture is dynamic. And so I've seen that happen in my lifetime where a native traditional powwow has moved from that into a competitive commercial contest orientation. And so for some of the people, that may be fine. But when you go to a traditional powwow, it's much different. People feel much better about themselves when they're dancing because they're not dancing for money. They're not dancing to please other people. They're not judged.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I've seen within my lifetime, within the last 20 or so years, That's my view.
Yeah, sure. What about, I've seen, for example, Native American dance theater, which is different than a powwow. It's almost like it's a dance performance. What do you think about that?
The Native dance theater, the ones I've seen, are really exciting, dynamic, entertaining. And if you look close at the themes that they're presenting, I think they're very accurate. I think some of the glitz and the glamour that goes with it is more to enhance the experience. And and as always, our Native people have adapted. We've adapted very well. So using the technologies and the media and different sources of talent to enhance what we already know is a good thing. So for me, sitting at the laptop, at a computer, is a typical everyday occurrence, So I don't, I think we need to use them in a better way. We're not tied to it. So we use it to enhance our own beliefs and sharing that with other people and communicating that to a wider audience is a good thing.
I've seen some of, and they tend to be younger natives, adopting and mixing cultural art forms like eulali, Indian rappers, Indian break dancers, and on the negative side also, when I hear of Navajo kids or kids in Warm Springs, basically, adopting black, urban style, what used to be called black style gangs, or now I think the cops call it LA style gang behavior, on the res, I begin to, also brainstorm about, okay, what are possible solutions? What does culture mean to them, and how do you respond to them?
I believe that, I think it's a trend, the trend that has occurred through all our reservations. And our young kids are trying to grab onto something that makes sense to them. And music is one of the valuable mediums that we have, and using music to presenting a message, and rap, using that message and vehicle to present an image, but I believe rap is not, native.
Yeah, right.
And so the young kids will, like to do that, that's fine, But I think they'll discover that what they have in their own neighborhoods is, in their own communities, their own culture, makes the most sense. And so, but they have to find that for themselves and understand that, because rap will only take you so far.
Right. Well, certainly, as far as it can take you, and I guess part of the question, when I ask what does it mean to be Native in the 21st century, is like, okay, we're in this time, and as we move forward, what does that begin to look like? Because we can't go back necessarily to the planes before contact. Here we are in a global context, and our numbers are growing. We're not a museum people. What does that look like as our culture emerges?
I think it's a critical piece that moving into this 21st century, it starts with our younger people. Primarily, our younger people are more of our population, so we have to cater to their needs, and it's very important. I've seen this happen at many workshops that use the music, rap, entertainment, artists, to get the message across. So it's just a vehicle.
Yeah.
It's not everything.
So I want to thank you for coming. It's been really great. If you like what you've seen, be sure to email us at liveclass@lanecc.edu. If you have suggestions for other guests, feel free to include that in the subject line. Tell a friend about us, and tell a friend about this show when it's a rebroadcast. I want to thank you, Don, for coming.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. It's enjoyable to speak about these topics.
It's been great having you. This has been DiversiTV. Go well, stay well.